you search, first place you look is the last known position. That's where it is. So there was ultimately never a search. And that ROV was only in the water for about 3 hours before they found it. So what does that mean? They went to the last known position, they looked on the sonar, they saw a clump that was never there before, they drove over to it, and there it was. Pretty much that simple, right? So, you know, all of this has just been people running around, waving their arms with their hair on fire for 4 days straight. And I just feel terrible for what the families must have been going through during that time. And that then goes back to why the authorities chose to not say what they...
I'm going to pause right here for a moment, and then we'll come right back. What I'm thinking is that Mr. Cameron, he's talking about how...
Begs a question now, doesn't it?
Yeah, why do you think
they
they
made
did?
a bad
I do
suggestion.
not want to speculate.
He was saying
Jim,
how...
I can speculate all day long, but I am not going to say it out loud. Look, Monday morning when I first found out about the incident, got on a whole bunch of calls and emails. It's a small community. Within an hour and a half, I had the following information. They were on descent. They were at 3,500 feet. They lost comms and tracking. The last one being the critical one. Because the transponder that's used to track a sub during descent and on the bottom is a fully autonomous system. It's in its own pressure housing, and it has its own battery power. So for them to lose comms and tracking at the same time, sub was gone. There was no question in my mind. For days, I tried to run other scenarios that could account for it, and I could come up with nothing. So the next thing I did was contacted a few more people and managed to track down, there are acoustic networks around. Some are research, some are intelligence. We got confirmation within an hour that there had been a loud bang at the same time that that comms were lost. A loud bang on the hydrophones. Loss of transducer or transponder. Loss of comms. I knew what happened. Sub imploded. I sent emails to everybody I know. I said, we've lost some friends. The sub has imploded. It's on the bottom in pieces right now. I sent that out Monday morning. We never expected to see a scenario like this. You know, we may go into hazardous environments like hydrothermal vents, or even to a wreck like Titanic or Bismarck or some of the other wreck sites, which are dangerous from an entanglement standpoint or a structural collapse standpoint. But you never worry about the vehicle, the platform that you're in, you know, and you certainly don't worry about implosion. There's never been an implosion of a vehicle with people in it. And so I think I don't want to say it blindsided the community, because there was a lot of concern. And by the community, I mean people who operate subs and build subs for a living. There was a lot of concern about this outfit and this sub. A lot of concern, even to the extent that I wasn't involved in it because I was making Avatar 2 at the time, but a lot of them got together and wrote a letter to OceanGate and said, you have to certify. You cannot take people down. It's irresponsible. And it could lead to catastrophe. Literally, the word catastrophe is in the letter. And I think that letter has been made public. All those signatories have come on. But, I never believed in that technology of wound carbon fiber, wound filament, cylindrical hull. I thought it was a horrible idea. I wish I'd spoken up, but I assumed somebody was smarter than me, because I had never experimented with that technology, but it just sounded bad on its face, because we make pressure hulls out of contiguous material: steel, titanium, ceramic, acrylic. And so you can model it, you can do finite element analysis of it, and you understand the yield properties, you understand the number of cycles that it can take. But you can't do that with a composite material, because it's two dissimilar materials, sort of blended together. And so we all knew that the danger was delamination and progressive failure over time with microscopic water ingress and fatigue, what they call cycling fatigue. And we knew that if the sub passed its pressure test, it wasn't going to fail on the first dive. It might fail on dive 7, or I don't know what they're at, you know, but it's going to fail over time, which is insidious. You don't get that with steel, with titanium. But, you know, sometimes people get go fever, you know, and look, we celebrate innovation, right? But you shouldn't be using an experimental vehicle for paying passengers that aren't themselves deep ocean engineers. Look.
Thank you, Mr. Tamarin. I really appreciate you. I'll let you do a full talk because I know that you have information to share because they say you went down there over 3 dozen and a half times to the Titanic while you were making the most famous film in the United States and in the world. So I really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
There's a part of me that hoped I was wrong. I really hope.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cameron. I appreciate it. We have another one that we want to share with you that's with Mr. Cameron, which is with Mr. James Cameron being interviewed by Anderson Cooper. Okay, so listen, people. Here we go.
Feet away from the bow of the Titanic. Obviously, people think about the bow of the Titanic and they think of your film Titanic with that iconic scene on the bow. I heard you earlier kind of talk about these two captains and kind of a similarity that you see, and I'm wondering if you could talk about that.
I think there's a great, almost surreal irony here, which is Titanic sank because the captain took it full steam into an ice field at night on a moonless night with very poor visibility. After he had been repeatedly warned by telegram, by Marconigram, by radio, during the day, that's what was ahead of him. And so I think we're also seeing a parallel here with unheeded warnings about a sub that was not certified, where the entire deep submergence community actually, or not the entire community, but a large number of them got together to write a letter to Ocean Gate, the company, and say, we believe that this could lead to catastrophe. It was less a criticism of the engineering than of the process, but it contemplated the fact that the engineering probably wouldn't pass muster from a certification bureau. And so they were trying to head this whole thing off. It was our worst nightmare. I mean, all of us in the deep submergence community, people like myself that pilot subs and design subs, implosion is obviously the specter that looms over us all the time. But because of that, that's the thing that you engineer for the most years in advance. So that should never be the problem. I've never believed that if I was, going to have a serious problem in a sub, that it would be implosion. Maybe entanglement in a fishing net, maybe a fire from the electronics. Hard to rule those things out. Implosion, absolutely not. Especially with modern finite element analysis and computer-aided design.
What should be what should we learn from this? Because obviously, deep water exploration. I mean, there's a pretty great. I don't know if it's great, but a very good safety record with people who have done the certification, people who have really studied this. Do you worry about this having an impact on the continued exploration?
I do. Look, I'm not worried about exploration because explorers will go.
They sure
and I'm not
will.
worried about innovation.
It's like the lady said, she said people that are adventurous, they're going to live it out.
Citizen explorers, tourists, but these are serious people with serious curiosity.
That's
willing
right.
to put serious money down to go to these interesting places, and I don't want to discourage that. But I think that it's almost that now the lesson, the takeaway is, make sure if you're going to go into a vehicle, whether it's an aircraft or a surface craft or a submersible, that it's been through certifying agencies, that it's been signed off. Every day we trust our lives to engineering. We step into an elevator. We make an assumption that somebody somewhere has done the math properly and it's all been certified properly. we should take the same precautions when we get into a submersible. Even if it's at a resort, we're only going down 300 feet or 1,000 feet. You know, I'm a partner in a submersible company called Triton. I'll say that up front. Triton, not Titan. And Triton has a perfect operational safety record across 20 vehicles and 10,000 hours of people diving to depths up to 1,000 meters. It can be done, but it requires rigor. And I think all of us in the community now that our worst fears have happened, and we know why it happened, I think largely, you know, it puts us now on even more alert to be disciplined and to really think about the ethics of it. You know, there's a lot of countries where subs are diving all over the world. You're not going to have regulation everywhere that solves this problem. It's really more that we have to just accept a standard of practice that we don't encourage operators to work without proper, you know, ABS or German Lloyd's or whatever it is certification.
The Coast Guard Rear Admiral today was talking about the unforgiving environment at those depths. Can you just talk about that feeling of being down there? I mean, I can't believe how deep you have gone into the ocean. 3 times deeper than the Titanic, I think you said.
Yeah.
What is that feeling of being down there?
Well, I always say you'd have to take a backhoe with you to go deeper than I went anywhere on this planet. That is a feeling of remoteness. I knew when I made that dive that there was no hope of rescue. There literally was no vehicle in the world, no matter if you could fly it in, no matter if I could survive long enough on my life support system. There was no rescue. I had to self-rescue if I had a problem. And we thought about that for the 7 years that we spent building the sub. And I designed a lot of the safety systems myself, knowing I was going to be in that sub, in terms of how to drop the weights. If I was incapacitated, the weights would drop themselves after a certain period of time. Many communications beacons for when I got back to the surface. If I had drifted off someplace, I'd have been picked up by satellite. They would have reported my position. I had radio. I had visual beacons. It wouldn't have required an aircraft search. They'd have found me pretty quickly. So you think all that stuff through, but the feeling in the moment, it's almost a